Welcome to the Every Mom is an Athlete podcast, where we believe that motherhood is inherently athletic. I see you lifting car seats, chasing toddlers, and carrying groceries one-handed while holding a baby and a coffee. Your daily life is a workout. I'm Dr. Karlie, pregnancy and postpartum expert, sports chiropractor, strength coach, entrepreneur, and mom of three. Here you'll find solo episodes and real conversations with other moms and leading experts, so you can live your strongest, healthiest, most aligned life in motherhood. No matter how long it's been since you've had your baby, whether you're reconnecting with your body, rebuilding your strength, or just figuring out what feels good again, you're in the right place. Hello and welcome back, Strong Moms. Today you have a little solo episode with me. We are going to talk about returning to running postpartum. And before I get started, if you are a new mom and you're hoping to return to running or get back to exercise in general, be sure to check out my postpartum plan because you are the person that I designed this plan for. I designed it. I did it 3 times. I've helped hundreds of women with it. And it really starts off with the simple, basic things that you need to do to get back to running, weightlifting, jiu-jitsu, whatever you want to do. So if you're in that position, be sure to check that out after this episode is done. That being said, let's get right into this because I see so many women in my office who want to get back to running. I personally am not a huge running fan, but I work with so many runners. There was a time where I worked with a lot of Ironman and half Ironman athletes. And so I really understand the love for running, even though I don't personally have it myself. So I get you. We're all in the same kind of crazy, okay? So I do see a lot of moms who want to get back to running. And I think, it's easy, right? Running is not easy, obviously, but it's simple to throw on your shoes and get out of the house. You're not having to go to the gym. You're not having to you should do a little stretching, but generally runners don't do a whole lot of warm up. So I understand the desire and the love to get back to it, but so many moms want to do it too soon. And I'm not here to fearmonger or anything like that, but I definitely do see women who have issues with pelvic floor stuff or hip mobility, stability stuff because they just weren't quite ready postpartum. And then I also see a lot of women who come back and I see on their second or third baby who are like, oh my gosh, I wish I would have done some of the stuff that you told me about my first pregnancy before I started running again, because it just really helps set you up for success. So what I want to do is give you some of the guidelines I use, talk through what that can look like. But remember, everyone varies. This is not medical advice. So always make sure to check with your provider or a pelvic floor physical therapist if you're able to before kind of setting up your plan to return to running. So the first thing that I always want new moms to think about is think about everything else we need to strengthen before you get back to running. So let's say you're brand new postpartum, the baby comes out. It's crazy. Actually, your abdominal muscles stretch up to 115% during your pregnancy from what their resting length is when you're not pregnant. So that is a lot of stretch in those muscles, and they do need time to come back and re-engage and learn how to work again. And then you have to remember how much stress and strain your pelvic floor is also under. And even if you don't have a vaginal birth, even if you have a C-section, well, arguably you had major surgery, so we still have to be a little bit cautious getting back into running. But your pelvic floor still takes a real beating through the pregnancy because of the extra weight and the baby bearing down on it. Everything is so lax and so much looser. And so your joints, your ligaments, your muscles, everything is just working differently. So we really want to get that back into working order before you go start running. Remember, running is a single leg sport. So I always want my athletes to feel really stable on one leg before they get out there and run. And another kind of crazy stat is that when you're running, the ground reaction force, so how much force is going back up into your body, is up to 2.5 times your body weight. So again, for this reason, these are all reasons we just need to really dial in our strength and stability before we start bouncing around while we're running. What does that mean? Where do we start? So like I was saying, I like women to start with all the basics. So breathing, bracing, getting your glutes working, reconnecting and coordinating your pelvic floor and your diaphragm and all that stuff. So no matter what sport you want to get back to, again, we would start with those things, right? So breathing and bracing, if you've heard me talk at all, I talk about this a lot. I think it's just so underutilized. And I remember before I was really in this world and really before I had a baby, I would go to these conferences, I'd learn about breathing techniques and how the diaphragm is connected. And I'm like, yeah, but we all breathe. But then once you have a baby and once you feel how crammed that diaphragm gets up there and how you just cannot get a deep breath in, that's because that diaphragm can't expand. The diaphragm, in case you're not aware, it's this big kind of flat muscle. It's right under the ribs on the front side of your body, and it moves down as you breathe in and up as you breathe out. And so it just doesn't get that full expansion because, there's a baby in there and there's your organs are all moved around and all that stuff. So we want to retrain that. So that's where we start. Then we start with bracing our core. And remember, you can do those two things like very early on postpartum, but it's also never too late to do them. So if you're like, oh man, I'm like 3 months, 4 months, 3 years, whatever, postpartum, you can really dial it back and start with some of that stuff and see a huge improvement in your athletic performance because sometimes it gets missed and our bodies are master compensators and we'll just like compensate through things and like do what we want to do. So you start with breathing and bracing. Then we're going to go into some hip stability work. Again, because your pelvis it's kind of refinding its natural position because it has been so tilted with the extra weight, with the belly, all that stuff for so many months. So that's where I always recommend things like glute bridges, any lateral hip work, where you have like a band and you're doing clamshells, monster walks. Like those are just really like top of mind things that are super simple that a lot of people like me, PTs, chiropractors, even like personal trainers who are really specialized in this area will recommend, right? Because again, we're trying to stabilize those hips, stabilize the pelvis. Also, the glutes, huge important part to getting back to running. The glutes actually attach into your pelvic floor directly. So when we're trying to heal up our pelvic floor, we have to take into consideration those glutes. So that's like where we're doing squats, we're doing Romanian deadlifts or deadlifts, we're hill walking. That's a great place to start. By the way, if you're not ready to get back to running, hill walking is awesome. That's what I have a lot of my patients and clients do because you really do use your glutes. You can think about using your glutes, which actually helps you engage them more. And you can get your heart rate up too. And so you can start to get that little bit of cardio without actually putting the strain and pressure on your joints right away. So that I love people to start with hill walking and then progress into kind of run walk and then back into running eventually. Now, a lot of people know it's not generally recommended that you start running before 12 weeks postpartum. So sort of the kind of common numbers that we think about are 3 to 6 months is where you're working back into running. Now, I have seen people start jogging before that. I've seen people start hill walking and then sort of progress into jogging, starting as early as 8 to 10 weeks. But again, I think it's totally individualized. Each person is so different. It really depends on your body, your history, your birth, like all those things. So I always err on the side of being more cautious because I like to have my patients do that cost benefit analysis. Like if you start running 2 weeks before maybe you quote unquote should have, what's the benefit? Is there really one? Like in the long term and the whole scheme of your life of all the years that you're going to be running or have been running? Probably not. But what's the cost? That could be pretty high, right? That could lead to prolapse symptoms, where you're dealing with leaking, with pain, with all these kind of different things, maybe that you wouldn't have had to deal with had you just waited a couple weeks. So I always err a little bit on the side of like slower is better because I've just seen too many people rush back in. And I know if you just wait that little bit and feel a little more stable and like your body has a little more time to recover, then doing the right things, right? Like you can do all kinds of other exercise and like rehab kind of stuff. But once your body is feeling better, then you've built the foundation. So I'm going to stop harping on that point now. You all get it. Okay. So there is a lot of research online, a lot of it done by PTs, and I have modified it a little bit in my office for my patients. So I'm going to give you what I quote unquote require my patients to do because obviously I can't actually require you to do anything because it's your body, but this is my strong recommendation to people of what they should be able to do before they get back to running. Number one is going to be you need to be able to walk for around 30 minutes without any issues. And what does that mean? That means no pain, no leaking, no feeling like something is falling out down there, like that sort of thing. The second thing is going to be you need to be able to hop on 2 feet. So just hopping up and down for a minute. Next, you need to be able to hop on 1 foot each side for up to a minute. I'll like let you get away with 30 seconds in my office if it seems like everything is going well. Okay, so 30 seconds to a minute. And again, remember, like I said, running is a single leg sport. So you really need to feel stable on that one leg. And again, make sure that none of those symptoms are occurring. Next is you need to be doing a plank So either from the forearms or the hands, I don't really care, for at least 30 seconds. I prefer closer to a minute. And again, the reason is we need to make sure that your core is strong because it is almost impossible to stabilize a joint out away from the body if your core is not stable, right? So how are we going to stabilize your hip, your knees, your ankles to be able to run if your core is like, whoa, all floppy all over the place? So you need a stable core to run. That is one of the things that I think gets missed by a lot of women, and also the thing that causes the most issues. Like I have seen all kinds of problems from back pain, literally to plantar fasciitis, that are stemming from the core and like the compensation patterns that develop from not having a strong core and really getting back into running. The next one, let's see, where am I? Oh, the next one is a wall sit. So you need to be able to do a wall sit. So that's like, a squats at 90 degrees, basically up against the wall, supported for up to a minute. Again, 30 seconds to a minute. Again, this is just checking the endurance, the muscular endurance of your legs and making sure that they are strong enough to support you in running. So those are what I always recommend my patients do. Of course, I really want them to start with some training of their core, of their glutes, of their hips. Like I honestly would rather them be squatting and lifting weights before they're running because that is just going to help build strength and help provide that stability so that they can get out and do something that's a little bit more dynamic, like running. Now, let's talk about red flags. So I did mention some of those things earlier that you want to make sure are not happening, okay? So leaking or peeing yourself, not normal, should not be happening. Having back or pelvic pain, especially if it's getting worse when you run, again, this could just mean that maybe your core is not ready. It means that there's some stuff that needs to be addressed first, especially if it's getting worse, like I said. If you're feeling anything like a sensation of heaviness or bulging or pressure or anything kind of like falling out of your pelvic area, of your vagina, then that is another reason that you would say, okay, A, I probably need to get in to see someone, preferably a pelvic floor PT. But then B, that's where we would want to do some things that are going to build some strength and stability before we get back to running. If you're having any pain, swelling, discomfort with impact anywhere, right? Like in the feet, in the hips, in the knees, in the ankles, whatever it is, in the low back, that's again something to be addressed either with pelvic floor PT or with someone like me who's a sports chiropractor or pregnancy and postpartum chiropractor, someone who can help you kind of address those issues and get you a plan to improve them. Another thing you want to look for is that coning or doming in your abdomen. So again, that's going to be really normal at first, immediately after birth, because so many women have ab separation, diastasis. But as you get closer to that mark where you're going to be able to be running, towards that end of that fourth trimester, that's where, you've hopefully done some breathing, bracing, hopefully my plan, because I really hammer that stuff home and give you a good foundation. Shameless plug. But then if you're noticing that still, like if you go to sit up out of bed and you're really noticing like that coning happening, then that means you need some more work there. So I would really recommend addressing that before you get back to running. And then, of course, you have to take into consideration like where you are in life. So if you are so fatigued, if you're so tired, from maybe not getting enough sleep, obviously, hopefully your nutrition is dialed in, especially if you're breastfeeding, right? Because it is just so physically demanding on your body. Hopefully your hydration is dialed in. Like all of those things are considerations that I would argue are much more important to your overall health than getting out for a run. Okay. So I know like if you're a runner, you want to run, but you've got to dial in that stuff first because of that, like just building the foundation. I also, and maybe we can talk about this in another episode sometime, but I always recommend starting off running just on your own, not pushing the stroller, just because it is going to change your mechanics. There are ways to modify for that, but I always recommend starting off if you're able. When you're first starting off running, you're not going to be running a long distance, try to pick like a loop around your house so that if you do start to feel any of those symptoms, you can just go home and you can call it quits earlier than you were planning on. What I hate to see happen is I've had women do this where you go out for a run and then you're like half a mile out and then you start leaking. And the thing about leaking is it's neurological. So what I always tell people to do, like, let's say, for example, I think I was just in the middle of an example. I'm like giving an example to my example. Okay, you get it. If you're jumping rope, right? Like when I was coming back from having my babies and I would start to get back to doing double unders in CrossFit and jumping rope, if I could do 10 double unders without leaking, but then I would do 15 and I would start to notice a little bit of leaking, that means I'm only doing 10. And I would only do 10 and I would rest. And let's say the workout called for 40 in a row, I would do 10 and I would stop for like 10 seconds. And then I would do 10 more and then I'd stop. And then basically what I do is then in another week or two, I would try 15. And if 15 was good, then I'd stop there. But what you're doing is you don't want to train your body to leak. Because if I just like power through, whether it's jump roping or running, then you're going to train your pelvic floor that that's something that's okay. And we want to train our body that it's not okay. And so by stopping before it happens, that is the ideal way to do that. So now back to my first example. If you're out running and you're half a mile out and now you're leaking and now you've got to get home, it might even be hard to like walk home, right? And so what I always recommend is just like, do a little walk run around the neighborhood, and then you can slowly start to increase that mileage, increase how long you're running versus walking, all that kind of stuff. All right. Well, I hope this has been helpful. Key takeaways, I really want you to remember, you need to focus on strength and stability before you get back to running. And remember, you can do that as early as the first week postpartum. So it's never too early. It's never too late. There is something you can do wherever you're at. Obviously, it's going to look different. Also, I really recommend, if you can, working with a pelvic floor PT, especially if you do want to get back to running, just to make sure, like get in there, get a baseline, and then she can evaluate down the road how things are going as you start to up your mileage. And I always just want to remind you again that everything is individual. So don't worry about what you see girl on Instagram doing. You run your own race. You have your own timeline. Your body and story and birth and everything is so much different than everyone else's. And so really, truly just like lean into that and be grateful for the fact that you're able to even consider getting back into running is just like so wonderful. I just like really lately have been trying to have a lot of appreciation for my body and what it can do, and like really leaning into that instead of like what it can't do or what I'm striving for. I'm trying to embrace where I'm at right now. So I just encourage you to do the same. All right, strong moms, I hope that's helpful. As always, if you have anything you'd like to hear about, any questions you have for the podcast, shoot me a DM on Instagram, Dr. Karlie. I am arguably on there way too much. So I would love to get back to you and also add it to my list for podcast episodes. Have a great week, and I'll talk to you next time.
Thanks for listening. Every Mom is an Athlete isn't just a podcast. It's a reminder. Motherhood is athletic, and you're still the athlete you've always been. But it's not about going back. It's about moving forward intentionally and powerfully. If this episode resonated with you, I'd so appreciate it if you'd share it with a friend, leave a quick review, or rate the show. It helps more moms to hear what they need to believe, that every mom is an athlete. See you next time.